Hey, wanted to take just a few minutes to share with you something out of Daniel chapter 8, all right? Actually, I have two things that I want to share, so two different videos coming up. But this one is concerning the phrase that's found in Daniel chapter 8 that says 2,300 evenings and mornings. And it's a subject matter that most people don't even talk about. I'm pretty fascinated by it, though, because I think it gives us some insight into the timeline of the 70th week of Daniel, all right? So I just kind of want to share that with you today. I hope that's okay. We go to Daniel chapter 8, verses 13 and 14. Let me just read it to you. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one who spoke, "How long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and the giving over of the sanctuary and host to be trampled underfoot?" So there's three parts to this question they're asking, okay? How long, the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and the giving over of the sanctuary and the host to be trampled underfoot. And he said to me, "For 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state." That's Daniel 8, verses 13 to 14. So, leading up to these verses, we have seen the Antichrist extend his territory, which is really detailed for us in Daniel 11, starting at verse 21. He becomes great in his own eyes and in the eyes of most of the world. He becomes as great as Jesus, all right? So, what do we see him do? Well, in chapter 8, the Antichrist, in 8:11, he stops the temple sacrifices, okay, stopping the worship of Yahweh. We know that that's the abomination of desolation that Daniel wrote about in Daniel 8, Daniel 9. Jesus referred to it in Matthew 24, verse 15, okay? The abomination of desolation. He stops the temple sacrifices. He overthrows the temple. And then he is given authority over another host of people, Daniel 8:12. He throws truth to the ground. He's a liar. And he acts and prospers. He's deceitful. He gets a lot of territory through deceit, okay? So then we get to the conversation of verses 13 and 14. But the question that is being asked from one holy one to another, whoever they are, is that how long concerning these three things? The regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and the trampling of the sanctuary and the host. Okay, so two of those three things we actually know. But the third one we don't know unless we are able to do like a math word problem, okay? So what do we know? We know the second part of that question, the abomination of desolation. We know that that takes place in the middle of the 70th week of Daniel. Okay, the 70th week of Daniel lasts for 2,520 days. It's divided in half, 1,260 days on the front half, 1,260 days on the second half. Really, Jesus only spoke about the second half, the 1,260 days that he said would be the time of great tribulation in Matthew chapter 24. I think it's verse 21 where he brings that up. So anyways, we divide that in half. The abomination of desolation, the day that the Antichrist goes into the temple, marks the halfway point. And we know that he is given authority at that point to rule over the nations, to rule over the Gentiles, to rule over Jerusalem for 42 months, 1,260 days. Point here is that the years that Daniel's referring that uses is 360-day years. They're lunar years, not solar years, not 365, okay? So 1,260 days adds up to 3.5 years, and that's what we're looking at here, okay? So 3.5 years, 1,260 days, he comes into the temple, and when he sets himself up to be God, he has 1,260 days until the end, okay? That's also true of how long he was given authority over the sanctuary. It says in Revelation 11, 2 and 3, that the sanctuary is given to the nations along with Jerusalem to be trampled for 42 months. Other references to this are Daniel 7:24, Luke 21:24, Revelation 13:5. Okay, so we know that the second half of the 70th week of Daniel, or as some people call it, the tribulation, lasts for 1,260 days. So we can subtract that 1,260 days from the 2,300 evenings and mornings, and we are left with 1,040 days. All right. So that covers the second half of the 70th week of Daniel. Now, what do we do with the other 1,040 days? Well, we have to go from the midpoint back to the beginning for that, because the 2,300 evenings and mornings are consecutive. So we can't have a break in the action. Since we know 1,260 days of that belong in the second half, now we move from the middle back towards the beginning, 1,040 days. And we are left with 220 days. What does that tell us? What's important about that? Here's the thing. Some people believe we won't actually know when the treaty between the Antichrist and Israel and the Muslim countries are signed. I believe we will. And I actually believe that the rebuilding of the temple will be part of that agreement. But what if we don't know when that treaty is signed? What if it's done in secret? It seems impossible to me that that would happen, but let's say it does. We still have signs that we're given right here. What are they? Well, the Jews will be given the ability to start building their temple, I believe, as part of the signing of that treaty. Regardless, even if it's not tied to that, we know that the regular burnt offerings won't start until they have a temple to offer the offerings in. So it's going to take them, according to this, we're left with 220 days out of the 2520. That is 7.5 months, and I believe that's how long it's going to take them to build their temple. 7.5 months. And so when we see them building the temple, that should be a sign to us that we are in the 70th week of Daniel. All right. Then they start to sacrifice. And we know from the day that they begin sacrificing until the end of the 70th week of Daniel is 2,300 evenings and mornings. So we know that we can start a countdown, if you want to, of when the tribulation is going to end. But we can also start a countdown to when the Antichrist will enter the temple and proclaim himself to be God. The day they start sacrificing, you have 1,040 days left until he comes into the temple. Why is that a big deal? Because when we see these signs taking place, we know that we are in the 70th week of Daniel. And that's a deal. Christians who are watching, when you see them building the temple, you know you've got 3.5 years. So you can prepare for the persecution that's coming. You can, get a place of hiding. You can do those kind of things, all right? And certainly, even if you're not paying attention to that, you know that when they start sacrificing, you have basically 3 years, 1,040 days. These are two signs for us that are so important during the 70th week of Daniel. We will not be caught surprised. We will not be caught unaware. We are looking. We are watching. So what is it? Daniel chapter 8 says, here's two things you can be looking for. Two things. And you can kind of keep track of where you are in the 70th week of Daniel. One, they're going to have to build a temple. And that's going to happen at the beginning of the 70th week of Daniel. Two, Antichrist is coming in at the midway mark. And when they start sacrificing, you know you have 1,000 days, 1,040 days, really, to get ready for when that persecution is going to start. Those are two things that help us to know. God didn't leave us clueless, right? He gave us opportunity to know so that we could prepare for what is coming in the 70th week of Daniel. And these are two things that come right out of Daniel chapter 8. God bless.